Yo, what's going on, YouTube, and welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy, Kevin Forte, and wow, we have some interesting stuff to get into today up in Vancouver. So as you guys all know, this is a big season for the Vancouver Canucks right now, playing in the Pacific Division, a division that's still trying to seemingly find itself. The Arizona Coyotes have moved on to the Central Division. May lead to some things down the road, but as of right now, it's just speculation. So the Coyotes are out. The Seattle Kraken, the expansion team, comes in. We're getting an idea of what they are. Spoiler, they're probably not a playoff team. And then you have the California teams, who we are expecting maybe San Jose to be a wild card team. Definitely the LA Kings, we're going to see improvement. Maybe not to this level, but improvement. And shockingly, the Anaheim Ducks have been one of the more surprising teams that we're going to see at the bottom of the standings. They're coming off a pretty nice winning streak. And then there's the Vancouver Canucks. And the Vancouver Canucks made some pretty big moves this summer. Obviously, the Jim Benning extension in the spring was kind of them saying, you know what, we believe in Jim Benning. We believe that he has a direction here. And now that they've kind of sold out on Jim Benning, now we're seeing things for what they are in Vancouver. He made a big move this summer. I mean, you look at, they bring in Vasily Podkolzin, a draft pick. Niels Höglander in his sophomore season in the NHL gets his first full season in the NHL. I know it was a 52-game season last year. Höglander didn't get that full season, and things kind of tailed off for him after the first month of the 2021 season. So, obviously making that big move, trading in Oliver Ekman-Larsson and Connor Garland from the Coyotes, trading their 7th overall draft pick, trading a couple of players. They moved on from Olli Juolevi here at the beginning of the season. There was a lot of stuff going on. Jason Dickinson comes in. So the Vancouver Canucks definitely made some moves, but the problem is they didn't fix one of the key issues of this team, which kind of is the defense. And the defense of this team just hasn't been what it's needed to be. And we're seeing that right now in Vancouver. You look at the Canucks record through the first 16 games of this season. 5 wins on the year. 5-9-2 on the season. 12 points. A .375 point percentage, which is well below 500, which is kind of what you're hoping for. And their goal differential is definitely one of the worst in the NHL. It's a -14 right now. So the Vancouver Canucks find themselves in a pretty bad spot right now. And, the interesting thing about the Canucks is they've played, you look at the next 5-6 teams in front of them. The Dallas Stars, the New York Islanders, the Colorado Avalanche, the Pittsburgh Penguins, the Buffalo Sabres, and the Columbus Blue Jackets. They have all played. The Islanders have played 11 games. Dallas, 13. Colorado, 12. They all have just either the same amount of points or slightly more points than the Vancouver Canucks. And some of them, like the Islanders, have played 5 less games than the Canucks. So that's very alarming if you're a Canucks fan. A team that, the expectations were that they would get back to the playoffs. We saw this team in 2020. In that weird year, Thatcher Demko goes on a run, and the Vancouver Canucks find themselves in the Western Conference Finals. And that seemed to have given people maybe a false sense of hope that this is a playoff team that can do well in the postseason. The only problem is, since that playoff run, we have not seen that team in really any shape or form. In the 2021 season, not a great year, ended up being a top 10 draft pick. And as of right now, through over a dozen games into the season, the Canucks are definitely looking a little interesting. And guys, we are a week away from Thanksgiving. And you guys know how this works. If you're a playoff team at Thanksgiving, looks pretty good for you making the playoffs come February, March into April. But if you're out of the playoffs, it's a lot more difficult for you to get yourself back into it at this point. It's not impossible. Teams have won the Stanley Cup. Again, the 2019 Stanley Cup champion St. Louis Blues. In January of that 2019 season, they were ready to go on a fire sale and sell everything off. And look how things turned out. And you even look at even more recently, the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, Marner, Nylander. Well, Nylander actually played decent. Tavares. A lot of those guys were struggling earlier this season, and there was talk, what are they going to do? And all of a sudden, they go on a big winning streak. But the problem is, Vancouver seems different because you've seen this before, and you're just not as confident in the personnel that they have. Because you look at their defense, that's the one key thing I look at, is their defense. And you're not getting enough depth goal scoring, that is absolutely true, but you look at their defense, that is the most alarming thing for me for Vancouver. At least for the Maple Leafs, you could say, well, at least they were winning some games here and there. They just narrowly won that game against the Blackhawks and stuff like that. For Vancouver, there's not really that sense. They had that early season win against the Philadelphia Flyers, and you thought, all right, there could be some good things coming from this. But they never really built off that momentum since that game. And like I said, you look at their lineup, it's just not what you would expect. I mean, you're seeing a lot of guys moving all over the place. You look at the most recent lineup from Daily Faceoff, Tanner Pearson, JT Miller, and Niels Höglander is your first line. Vasily Podkolzin, Bo Horvat, and Connor Garland, your second line. No Brock Besser in there. Or Elias Pettersson. And that's why you get to the third line. It's Jason Dickinson, Elias Pettersson, and Brock Besser on your third line. That is a pretty interesting thing that they're doing there. And again, Brock Besser and Elias Pettersson are part of the reason the Canucks are struggling right now. And then you look at the fourth line, you have Tyler Mott, Juho Lamikko, who was part of the Arizona Coyotes. I think he was a part of that trade, actually, and Alex Chason. And then you look at the defense. This is where the concern comes for me. It's not the top well, really, it's, again, you could argue it's possibly all these guys except Quinn Hughes. You have Quinn Hughes and Tyler Myers as your top pair. And then you get to Kyle Burroughs and Oliver Ekman-Larsson as your second pair. Kyle Burroughs was a Bridgeport Sound Tiger for the New York Islanders a couple years back. Just so you remember, that year where Garth Snow got fired? Yeah. Then you have Brad Hunt and Madison Bowie on your third pair. That just shows you the lack of depth right now for the Vancouver Canucks. And again, they do have some injuries. You look at their injuries right now. Luke Shen, placed on the injured reserve. Brandon Sutter, injured reserve. Matthew Highmore, on the injured reserve. So there's a lot of injuries for this team. That is absolutely a fact. But this team is just not getting it done. And it's very, very concerning right now when you look at just the epitome of, just the lack of depth on this Canucks team. It is terrifyingly nerve-wracking. And, the other day, Jeff Marek was actually saying in his radio thing that the Canucks owner, Francesco Aquilini, is with the team on their road trip. And you wonder if he's going to kind of get an idea from, happening to be in the locker room and just kind of being around the guys to maybe get a better idea of what is the root of the problem in Vancouver. Is it the coaching staff? Is it the leadership on the ice? What is going on? And I think he's going to try and get to the bottom of that over the next couple of weeks because, again, they're going to, this perfect timing for that. You're looking at next week being Thanksgiving. You're looking at maybe after Thanksgiving, the first week of December, maybe the Vancouver Canucks and the Aquilinis either firing personnel, probably not going to be your general manager or your head coach. You just gave extensions to Travis Green, the head coach, and Jim Benning, your general manager. And again, with the lack of money coming in right now and less revenue from ticket sales, it's going to be harder for the Aquilini to really Francesco Aquilini to make that decision to pull the plug on one of those guys. Again, if you're going to have to buy them out and pay a new coach or general manager, that's a lot of burden, a lot that you're riding there. So that is something that is going to be interesting. And it makes me think the easy decision is a player personnel change, which could be on the table. Now, what I think is interesting, too, we've been hearing a little bit about the Philip Forsberg front with the Nashville Predators. Now, the Nashville Predators are actually playing pretty well, but that doesn't mean they aren't at least considering a trade, especially for a pending unrestricted free agent. Would the Vancouver Canucks double down? They made their big move this summer. Do they double down even more and maybe go for a Philip Forsberg as a personnel move? It adds some scoring depth to their team. Obviously, Brock Besser's not getting it done. Maybe Brock Besser goes in that deal. Is that something that could come to fruition? That's something to definitely consider. So that's just one of the things I'm looking at as a possibility for the Canucks. Philip Forsberg has been talked about with the New York Rangers recently. But honestly, as much as I'd like to see the Canucks bring in another forward, they need help on defense. They really need some defensive help. And that's where you wonder if maybe they go to Toronto and they ask about Justin Hall or Travis Dermott, because those seem to be guys that are kind of on their way out of the Toronto Maple Leafs. Yeah, it may cost you a pretty penny, but I think the Vancouver Canucks right now are very desperate on the blue line to add some help. And with Travis Hamonic having his whole thing at the beginning of the year, apparently maybe because of COVID, as well as now the Luke Schenn injury, Jack Rathbone, trading out Olli Juolevi, you could really use Olli Juolevi right now, right? And he was on the scratch pad the other night for the Charlotte Checkers in the American Hockey League, so maybe that isn't the hugest loss. But with that, all aside, the Vancouver Canucks, the lack of drafting defensemen is obviously, other than Quinn Hughes, which was a slam dunk, it's been a real issue for the Canucks, and it's starting to bite them now. And the lack of depth they have in the system is completely apparent. And when we saw Jim Benning make all those depth signings this summer, that was just to replenish what they had lost. They had really lost a lot of guys in the farm last year. Again, you have to remember the Canucks moved their affiliate from the Utica Comets over to Abbotsford. That did have something to play into with the amount of movement in the AHL, because a lot of guys wanted to stay on the East Coast. And unfortunately, the Canucks lost some of those guys. So that is something you also have to remember. A lot of turnover in the AHL. The AHL team change from the Utica Comets to the Abbotsford Canucks definitely had some of the play in that as well. But you also have to look at it in the scheme of, this is a team that just going into the season, you could have seen it written on the wall. Where is your defense? And it's very apparent right now. And I think, when you look at the Canucks and you look at, the start they have gotten themselves off to, a 5-9-2 start, the Vancouver Canucks are off to their worst start to a season since 1997. I know Canucks fans don't like to look back at that time frame because it was a difficult time for the Canucks in the late 90s after that that run in 94 when the 91 or 94 when the Rangers beat them in the Cup final. Everything after that kind of fell apart for the Vancouver Canucks. And you just have to wonder what is wrong with this Canucks team. And you look at the roster, the way the starting lineup looks when Pettersson and Besser are on the third line, when Jason Dickinson has 1 point, who was one of their key offseason additions to the forward depth. Goaltending just not being as good as they would like. I mean, JT Miller's leading the team in points. He's got 20 points. That's great. Connor Garland, he's got 12 points. Not too bad. But then you're seeing Elias Pettersson with 9 points. Brock Besser with only 8. Vasily Podkolzin only has 3. He's got as many as Oliver Ekman-Larsson. That's not great. And then you're just seeing some guys that just you're not getting enough out of. And unfortunately for the Canucks, they just can't afford to have this kind of a start, because it does look like that Pacific Division is actually better than I think we've given it credit. And, to make things worse, when you look at their penalty killing, I mean, their power play is 15%. That's 25th in the NHL. That's bottom 5, or that's 7th worst in the NHL. There's 6 teams behind them. You look at the penalty kill. Worst penalty kill in the NHL, 62%. You know who's in front of them? Everybody in the NHL. 31 NHL teams. That includes the Arizona Coyotes. The Arizona Coyotes, yes, the team everybody's been making fun of. They have a worse penalty kill than them by 3%. The Coyotes have a 65.3% penalty kill. The Canucks have 62.3. They have a 3% better penalty kill. And the Canucks are supposed to be a playoff team this year. You know who's also in front of them? The Montreal Canadiens. The Ottawa Senators. Teams that are struggling mightily right now in the NHL. The Vancouver Canucks are behind all of them. Yes, even the Arizona Coyotes. And you're just wondering to yourself, what has to change for this team? And like I said, it's not even just the defense. Like I said, the power play's not working. Pedersen and Besser haven't been great. Podkolzin hasn't been the best as like secondary depth scoring, as well as Jason Dickinson. They're just not getting enough, and they don't have enough guys on this team that are going to be that guy that's just really a pain in the ass to play against. And I think, when Alexander Burrows left this team, again, a guy that's very much hated on the West Coast, from Calgary to Edmonton to the California teams, he's that guy that's just, he reminds me a lot of Brendan Gallagher in Montreal. A guy that's just a heart and soul guy that everybody else hates, but your team loves. And look, I still got his jersey. I still have an Alexander Burrows jersey back from his time scoring those game winners, those series clinching goals back in the golden years of the Vancouver Canucks when they were winning Western Conference championships, President's trophies. They didn't end up getting the Stanley Cup in that span, but they just need that kind of guy, and they just don't. And you could tell, it's pretty apparent, just the lack of just blood and sweat given to the organization from some of their players. And maybe that's where we'll see a change for the Canucks. Everybody thinks it's crazy that they would trade a guy like Besser. I don't think it's out of the question. I think Pedersen and Hughes are untouchable. But other than that, I'd really be hard-pressed to say that anybody else at this point is untouchable. And there was a lot of concern this summer about the signing or the bringing in of Garland and Ekman-Larsson. And Ekman-Larsson with 3 points right now, he was supposed to add offense on that defense, as a defenseman, and he just has not been able to do that. Thatcher Demko has not been the world beater that he was in 2020, and we've never seen that form return. And that's kind of where the Canucks are at right now. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think is going to happen to the Vancouver Canucks? What has to change? Is it just a player personnel change? Are we going to see a coaching change or a firing of general manager? What has to happen in Vancouver? Because, again, they just invested a lot of money into those positions. It's going to be difficult for them to make that decision. And like I said, I think, in my opinion, it's going to be a personnel change. I don't know who's going to get moved out. Is it a Brock Besser? Is it somebody else? Do you sell him when his value is low? There's a lot to consider here for the Canucks, but it's going to be interesting what they end up doing. Is it going to be a defenseman bringing in a defenseman? Are they going to just throw all their chips into this basket? Could be very costly for the Canucks, but I don't think they have much of a choice right now. And the groans and the angst in Vancouver is definitely growing as this season goes along. And give it next week and Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving. And you're going to be looking at a Canucks team 20 games into the season that could be really hurting. So let me know what you guys think. If you like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL and more videos just like this one, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and an even bigger subscribe down below. Guys, this is a huge road trip for the Vancouver Canucks. And like we talked about, this could be the road trip where the Canucks sink or swim. And like I said, they played Colorado, Vegas, and Anaheim. Lost all 3 of those games. They have the next 3 games at home. We'll see what they do going into Thanksgiving. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time. Go Canucks.